So I'm like, fucking, I'm still stupid.
That was a good spot to start recording, actually.
Oh, you started it when I said I was stupid.
Yeah. Perfect. All right, so this is what the whole debate's on. This little plant right here. And a lot of people look at that plant and they're like, oh, that's great. And a lot of them are, it's evil. We need to outlaw it. And there's been a lot of reform recently, right? So especially with marijuana policy throughout the United States, Canada, and other countries. But what I wanted to know is, objectively, does the war work? And we would agree, I think, that we're in a war on drugs. This is what the United Nations had to say. They released a report of the Global Commission on Drug Policy in 2011, so about a decade ago. Their conclusion was that the war on drugs had failed. The starting point for this review is a recognition of the global drug problem as a set of interlinked health and social challenges to be managed rather than a war to be won. So they go into detail about comparing it to making diabetes or obesity illegal. It's not going to fix diabetes or obesity, so why make it illegal? And so you have to be able to prove what they're saying, though, too, because this is the United Nations, right? So they go into depth about why. And here I talk about how Nixon, it's been called a failure, but we need to indicate why. So empirical evidence means, I've looked it up, I've observed it, I've made observations, and this is the evidence of why it works or why it doesn't work. And I looked up both. And we're going to summarize the data, or that's what I did below, and then go through a much more detailed analysis in the frequently asked questions at the bottom part of this document. Portugal legalized drugs, or at least decriminalized them, but they're not taxing them or anything. They're not like, hey, that crack right there is going to be $25. But arguments for that, like in that it could actually help pay for harm reduction facilities, which I'll get into later. So this is just a cursory glance of what's going on in the United States since drugs have become illegal and with our incarceration rate. And what I was telling you yesterday when we were kind of going through this was, if you just stop the chart here and you look at everything to the left of this line, you see a dramatic rise, right? But then it's dwarfed by this rise up here. It being outlawed here in the 1930s after the prohibition, there was still a dramatic rise in the incarcerated peoples. This is the number of millions. This is going from what appears to be about 200,000 here to about 500,000 people. So we're already doubling, or times 2.5 in the 60 years since it was outlawed. We're getting strict on it, right? So this is when the United States declares a war on drugs. Nixon, our good friend that never did anything wrong, he declared drugs public enemy number one here in 1971.
This is what I went about damn drugs here with marijuana. Can I get that out of this son of a bitch? Domestic council. Sure. I mean, one on marijuana that just tears the ass off of them. I see another thing in the news summary this morning, but that's a funny thing. Every one of the bastards that are out for legalizing marijuana is Jewish. What's the crisis the matter with the Jews, Bob? What is the matter with them? I suppose because most of them are psychiatrists, honestly. All the great psychiatrists are Jewish. By God, we are going to get the marijuana thing. And I want to get it right and square and put someone on my way, put moral
Then the war on drugs gets launched by the actor Ronald Reagan. And then Congress enacts the minimum mandatory sentencing for drugs here in mid-1980s. And then here's 3 strikes and you're outlaws of the 1990s.
Yeah.
Spirals out of fucking control.
Yeah.
There's 2.3 million Americans incarcerated versus 200,000 back in the 1920s.
Yeah.
It's been said that a good way to measure the humanity or whatever of a people's is how they treat their prisoners. And for those of us that have a lot of family in prison, I'm half Lakota Sioux, have a lot of American family, and a lot of them are incarcerated. They're all prisoners, and you know they're not treated well. I can tell you that. They're not. It's not a rehabilitation program. It's a criminal college. It's you're expected to join a gang based upon your race. It's legalized segregation. It's a very, very negative environment for drugs. You know, like let's be, if you're murdering people, like what those 2 white boys did in Georgia to that what was his name? Avery.
It's Ahmaud Arbery.
Ahmaud Arbery.
Yeah.
I've definitely and that to me that requires some sort of action. But some kids smoking a joint or doing a little bit of crack or heroin or whatever it is that they're addicted to, what does that do to you or me?
Honestly, I mean, really nothing. I mean, unless they're like harming other people in the process. But
I mean, the governor. Go ahead.
I wanted to play a little bit devil's advocate with because I don't know, but with the chart, but the population of the U.S. in the 1920s versus the population of the U.S. in 2010, like, is that much of a difference? And
well, yeah, of course, but the so let's.
But I mean, the incarceration rates really, it's still crazy. I mean, there's millions of incarcerated prisoners.
So here's the population of the United States. It went from 100 million to 300 million today. So times 3. And this source here is Eurostats. So I'm going to go ahead and go on a limb and trust them. I don't see that they have any motivations to lie to us about that.
Yeah.
Times 3. So 200 times 3 is 600,000.
Yeah.
Should be looking at the top that our prison population should be is right where this line where President Nixon declares drug abuse public enemy number 1.
Yeah.
So if anything, our numbers should be well below this mountain.
I agree with that.
And if you look at the statistics that I presented below, which I'll get into it more, the percentage of drug users, what do you think it was back here? How many of these people are in there for using drugs?
I'm not sure.
4%.
4%? Wow. Yeah.
What do you think it is here?
Probably 4%. Probably the same amount.
50% of all
really?
people that are in here are in there for drugs.
Yeah.
So that population increased by tenfold, which accounts for this mountain of people. And specifically, you can see that there's a correlation between, and I would argue a causation, between the number of prisoners and the drug laws that get passed.
I mean, in the graph really, it's pretty clear, especially when the drug laws pass right there, and then you see an enormous spike in incarcerated people.
That's the other thing is that you can look up my sources later. So this is source number 1. So I don't want to just pull figures out of my ass. So if you go to source number 1 here, this is from the report of the Global Commission on Drug Policy. So it's a solid source. So I was in an Uber yesterday, right? And I asked the guy, what do you think would happen if we legalized all drugs? And he's like, they'd go crazy. Everybody would go crazy. Everybody would be hooked on drugs. He's like, you can even look at the studies of what happened since they legalized marijuana, and all these soccer moms are out there smoking pot now. And I'm like, oh, that sounds intriguing, bro. Like, which studies?
Yeah.
Oh, studies. And I was like, okay, which studies? You know, like say empirically based here. Like, what are you talking about? Like, there has been a dramatic rise in marijuana usage, which to me means that a lot more people are going to sleep early. I don't really have a problem with the dramatic rise in marijuana usage, but maybe you do. So show that. And this, again, a quality source. It's showing us that the drug addiction rate, since it became public enemy number one, this is back in 1971 when Nixon, our good, loyal, patriotic friend, declared it public enemy number one. There's been zero effect, despite this ballooning green problem of the amount of money that we're investing in it. And in case Americans don't know, we're fucking broke, and we're about to have some serious, serious problems in this country. Putting out trillions of dollars a fucking month now, and it's making our money into monopoly money, which is a completely another issue. But I think it's pretty safe to say that if we could save some money, that we should. And that this problem, this green mountain, is all these criminals who aren't criminals if we just legalize it.
Yeah.
So what he thinks is going to happen, what my Uber driver thinks is going to happen, is that, you know, your kids, my kids, everybody's kids are going to be running around doing heroin and crack now because we legalized it. Well, the data shows us that if little Jimmy and little Sarah want to go out there and do crack, they're going to do it whether you make it illegal or not. How many of these people do you know, people that have a drug problem, how many of them do you think are unaware that their drugs are illegal?
I'm pretty sure they know they're illegal.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, do you really think like Jerome the crackhead's gonna be like, what? Illegal?
Oh shucks.
I'm gonna go home, guys. This is I don't have one, but like I'm not gonna do this illegal thing. It's fucking crazy.
Last night, I tell you, to watch that thing on television as I did, to see those monkeys from those African countries, damn them, they're still uncomfortable wearing shoes.
Well, and then the tail wags the dog there, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The tail wags the dog.